Welcome to Highly Affected by Her Surroundings, the podcast where we reveal how your environment can make or break your day. Hosted by me, Nicole Rowe, owner and lead designer at Arnixon Interiors. Okay, I'm so excited to be with my friends. Hailey Kolbe today. We met at Luann Live.
We did.
No.
Yeah, we did.
It was Luann Live. Okay. I couldn't remember. I feel like I've known you for longer than that. So the fact that it was just Luann Live last November means it's only been a year.
I know. It's so fun.
But I would love to give Hailey the opportunity to introduce herself, kind of talk about what her interior design firm does, and just kind of dive in. So Hailey, go to it.
Okay, well, I'm Hailey Kolbe from Hailey Kolbe Design. I live in Bryan, Texas, which is near College Station, so home of Texas A&M. I am actually a former nurse. I'm a nurse by education. And it's just a huge part of my story that I always wanted to be an interior designer, but I graduated during the recession and went on to pursue job security and financial security through nursing. And so it was a few years into my practice as a stroke nurse when I heard the Lord say, "You don't have to do this forever." And I was like, "What do you mean? I just feel like I just took the hardest exam of my life. Like, how? And so I just started praying about it. Like, did I hear you right? What would that look like? And so I started to pull my resources with like people I knew in my community that did design, and not one of them in my community had a degree in design, but they ran very successful businesses. So I pursued relationships with them, eventually found a job by just like the grace of the Lord, and got denied one job at a really big firm in my town because they said they didn't have time to train me. And I said, okay. And so I went to work for someone else, and a year later they recruited me out of that job. And I ended up working for them for 3 years, where I got my experience in construction design and retail. It was an 18,000 square foot showroom. So we were going to market, we had walk-ins, so it was a brick and mortar with custom interior design services. And so that is really where I jumped off with my experience in design, and it was until 2019 that I left the firm to create my own small little firm, not to the scale that I was currently working at by any means. It was multi-million-dollar firm, 7 employees, really big. And so I wanted something small, and that's what I started in 2019. And so now I offer full scope interior design services for remodels, new builds, and furnishing projects. We take everything from small projects to full projects, of course. On our small projects, we mainly just require that we have full control over that room. We ask if there's any items, we're going to incorporate, which we love to do because we'll get into that later. I do a lot of antiques, vintage, and incorporating current heirlooms from the client into the design. And so if we start a furnishing project, we start there, or we start with a blank canvas, and we have full control over that room, and we go from there. So, yeah.
Well, I feel so strong about so many of the things you said, like starting in nursing. Like, nursing is a very specific career choice. Many people fall into it because, family members or friends did it. But to use that side of your brain and now really move into business ownership, you're a founder, but you're also creative. Like, that is a real pivot.
It is a real pivot. And I really thought that I was going into design for the creative field, and because I felt like a creative at my heart. And I remember telling my boss at the firm, his name was Josh, he's now passed away, but he was such an incredible mentor to me. And I remember telling him, hey, I want you to know I only want to design. I never want to be a manager. I never want to do anything but design. And he chuckled at me. And I remember him chuckling at me, and it was so funny because when I was leaving the firm, I was about to go work for another designer, and the Lord kind of just slammed that door closed and was like, no, you're going to open up your own business. And today I can confidently say I actually love the business side more than even the creative side. But obviously I'm still a creative. So this conversation really intrigues me to be able to spend some time talking about creativity today.
Yes, and I find the same true to me. I love interiors. I love designing a space. I love the construction side of it, but being a founder and a business owner, especially as a woman who is doing it well,
Yeah.
and successful and really puts in the grit, and you have, I don't remember how many kids you have, but you have children that are going to see this happening. Like
Hmm.
they see mom working hard and mom having a finished product. That's just, I mean, that's really impressive.
I'm excited about that, for sure.
I do think it's interesting how when you went to interview with the one firm, I'm sure they loved you, but then the comment of you don't have enough experience. And as a business owner who's currently trying to hire a designer, it's really hard to be like, I like this person a lot, but I'm wearing so many hats. I need someone who's really technically ready to take on the role, even as an assistant. But then to be able to go back later and be like, okay, we want you. We know you're ready. Like you said, God has now put this plan in place. So good for you.
Yeah, it was honestly an answered prayer because they were offering me very little hourly. And when I was recruited out of that job I did get to go work at the firm, they ended up having to pay me double what they were offering because I was like, I'm happy where I'm at. You didn't want me, and you didn't have time to train me due to my lack of experience. And they ended up having to pay me double. And so we joked, Josh and I joked about that later on. I'm like, don't you wish you would have hired me the first time? It would have cost you a whole lot of less money. And he would laugh. And he was like, don't even mention it.
But I love that life lesson for people who are wanting to get into design. Like, or, if you're just, I don't want to say switching jobs, but I'm all for staying with somebody, being loyal, but also forging your own path. So good for you. And during all of this, you guys decided to build your own home. And I know we have talked about how that process went, and you designed a studio on the same property as well.
Yes.
So maybe kind of dive into what your vision was, how y'all got the land, and the process a little bit.
Yeah, so we actually live on what we joke is our family compound. We live next to Chad's sister and my husband's sister and her husband and three kids, and we live next to his parents. We have them in a barn and arena, and we ride horses. And well, they ride horses. I don't ride anymore, but yeah, we live all together on this piece of property here in Bryan, and it's so sweet. It did take a few years for us to really pray through whether we were ready to like invest in something that was a beautiful gift like family land, but ultimately we did decide to build, and I did that the first year I was in business on my own. And I took that as a business opportunity, not only to just build a home for us. And so I was like, how can I set this up to really serve me in the business, to project, to kind of set off my career. I followed designers like Lauren Lease and Erin Gates, that's her. So I studied like their portfolios, and essentially one of their first publications were their own homes. So I was like, okay, what's my business plan? How can I design this to set me up for possible publication? And to be able to just, yeah, propel my career forward that way.
I think in our own homes, there's an interesting pressure. Most of us don't have the same budgets as our clients, especially the
Amen
clients
to
that are
that.
paying us full service, as much as I'd love it. But on the other hand, there's a very high expectation of our own homes. People expect, as a designer, to have this great, fully finished, fully styled home. And as, someone who's new into business, that's a lot of pressure on you.
It is. And honestly, we cut a lot of square footage that we could have built if I would have been willing to sacrifice some of the interior finishes. I wanted a complete home. I wanted all my fixtures, lighting, plumbing. I wanted my level 4 finish on the walls. I wasn't willing to compromise those things. And I wanted specific custom trim around my cased openings with like a little dog ear edge because I was building a New England style home because realistically, I was thinking, okay, what type of product can I put in this home that looks beautiful, that speaks to the exterior? And we all know when building a modern home, if you're not doing easily accessible ready-mades, it can get quite expensive on the luxury side of design with modern interiors. And so I merged my love for antiques and vintage and built a home that comfortably welcomed that style so that it was cohesive. And I just wanted to make sure that I had the budget to furnish it. I didn't want to sit on my home for like 5 years before I could photograph. We moved in December of 20 and I photographed in August of 22.
I mean, that's a really great turnaround for that, but I really want to just scream from rooftops, and I've told clients this in the past, reduce your square footage. If you have an expectation of how you want it to be, make the house smaller,
Make it
and then we
smaller.
can finish it that way. It's less square feet of tile, it's less bathrooms to furnish, it's bring your ceilings lower. You don't need the huge light fixture. There's so many ways
Yes,
to get
amen.
that
I did
finished
that.
house, and especially for you in Texas, like most people build huge. Like
Yeah,
you're on
most build
land.
huge, and you walk in and they're quite empty. And
Yeah.
so, and then the reality hits them of how much it really costs to furnish. So that's really important. And I can't express what you just said more for someone who's living on land because, like us, and we built the studio, which we'll talk about. We did that. We finished construction on that last summer. We did that much later. It's a separate garage, and as if anyone has been to New England, you will have commonly seen a house with a garage setback or a barn setback, and so the garage is like a barn. It does look similar to a barn, and then the studio is on top of it. And when you have land and you have that opportunity to increase square footage elsewhere, it's just a really smart investment. And so my studio is solely for Hailey Kolbe Design right now, but it is ready to be fitted out as a full apartment. If it ever needed to be, it also could be a kid's like hangout space in the future or potential revenue if we wanted to rent it out as a full apartment.
I think it's great that you did that flexibility. And I know I live in a more rural area as well. So family compounds are not unusual here. I have a lot of friends who, the aunt, the uncle, the parents, the cousins, they all live within however many acres. And it's really special. And we're also doing another project where the client, we're like small square footage and then plan out, the greenhouse, the gym, the pool house for later and get the house you want. So I think that's really, really good. But I would love for you to kind of elaborate on the like comforting welcome. Like that seems to be what your North Star was for your house. How did you kind of lean into that?
Well, I studied a lot of Gil Schaefer's work. He prides himself, he's an architect in New York, and prides himself on building new old homes. And I studied new old homes. I wanted some features that just made the home feel old. Because, of course, people have memories of these old homes with their grandparents or their own homes that they grew up in. And so I leaned into the architecture there with some features that would just really make the floor plan itself and layout feel old in its own right and very welcoming that way because it would be more intimate. And I also leaned into what antiques I'd already collected. So I did a custom floor plan around the sizing of the antiques that I had. So I brought in a lot of warm woods, and my antique furnitures. I think the only ready-made I have is my upholstery in my house.
That is, I mean, what a collection. We'll get into it a little bit later with the antiques because there's so much to talk about with Texas and antiques. But back to like your custom floor plan. Natural light for you is huge. Texas, I swear the sun is larger in Texas, but it's also more intense. So, kind of what were some things y'all did to really incorporate natural light within your home, but also to kind of protect you from, too much natural light?
Yes. I would have loved, I love the plain glass that has no UV protection, but unfortunately that's just not realistic here in Texas, like it is in New England. And so I did have to have like a UV coated glass window, but I positioned the windows with the orientation to sun and how I wanted to function with the sun. So personally, we don't sleep in, so I wanted our bedroom to be on the side where the sun rose. And I have historically been really high efficiency in the evenings. That's kind of my high achieving time of the day of getting things done. So I put my office before, because I had an office in the home before I built the studio, I put that on the side with the most natural light and where the sun would set, so I could get the most out of my day, productivity wise. And I wanted my children's rooms on that side of the house where the sun was setting, because if they were going to be playing in their rooms in the afternoon, I wanted them to have as much natural light. The beautiful thing is window treatments are like just magic. So if you allow the room to be flooded with light with windows, you can always control that with window treatment. So I have woven shades throughout my house. I have blackout curtains. I have sheers. Depending on the room and how the sun comes in is how I decide what type of window treatment it needs to be able to control. But I start with what is the maximum amount of light that I can get. And so my dining room, I made sure that it was going to get both morning sun and evening sun, because you're in there, and we're in there in the morning for breakfast, and we're in there in the evening for dinner. And so because it's a smaller home, we eat our meals at our 8-person dinner table, because I don't have a breakfast space. So we have the counter and we've got the table, but it's kind of a part of Chad and I's ritual and lifestyle that we would prioritize meals at a table together. So that was important that the sun hit there in both ways, both directions. And so, and I made sure that my kitchen window was facing really beautiful light that was not harsh. And so you could enjoy standing there and you didn't have like the sun glaring in, but it was still really natural and beautiful. And I made sure that we had a really good view on that side of the house. And so there are no homes in that view outside of that window. So it just looks out to trees. So that's really nice.
That is really cool. I'm curious, the childhood home you grew up in, was it light and bright and full of sunshine, or was it darker?
That's a great question. There were areas that were darker and there were areas that were bright, now that I think of it. And I remember gravitating towards the brighter areas. Light, I did discover in therapy I'm really sensitive to, as far as like my mood, and kind of discovered one childhood memory that I associated light with safety. And so at that moment, I was actually designing the floor plan, and it was like a light bulb went off. I'm like, no wonder I'm putting windows all over the house, because that was my one thing I didn't compromise. I compromised on wood windows, but I did not compromise on the amount or size of windows. And so I was like, well, no wonder I want light everywhere, because it feels really safe to me. And I think it's just a wonderful, like, just coloring that comes through in the house. Anything artificial just doesn't feel genuine, right? And it doesn't feel welcoming or inviting. And so it really did all kind of click together. In my one therapy session, I'm like, wow, that's how deep this goes. Okay.
I mean, we know this podcast is called Highly Affected by Her Surroundings. I have done the therapy dives, I've done the journaling, and I've really realized that our environments so much impact us, but also like our childhood. And it doesn't need to be like a trauma to really affect what we are, but it's just how we grow up. And it is an important question that I love to ask my clients is talk back to your childhood home. What did you love? What did you not want to repeat? Like what is kind of our end goal here? And everyone's a little different. Some want what they grew up with and others want a complete 180. So good for you for really recognizing that.
Yeah, I think when you really spend time in therapy, you can go back to your childhood and really dig up what you appreciate and be able to kind of file and organize those memories in a more appropriate manner. And so you can really discern, okay, this is what I loved and this is what I want to emulate in my future home, and this is what I don't want to have represented in my home. And I think a lot of my clients who have spent time in therapy, they have clear answers when I'm asking those things. Like, do you want solid wood floors because you have this memory of the sound of walking on solid wood floors as a child? Would you like for us to budget for that? Or is that not, a priority? Things like that. And those clients that have gone through therapy, they have clarity for sure. And they're like, yes, no, yes, no.
I think that really is great. And it takes some pressure off you on the back end because they've already worked through that. They're not needing you to really get them there. And a question I love to ask my clients is like, how do you want your house to feel? Like, what are some words? And when they say safe, like they want to walk in and feel safe. That really dictates how our design is because, once again, window treatments, maybe not all open spaces, dictates where the bedrooms go. Like you want them to come home, be able to lock the front door and feel safe. So that is, a really, really good point. Okay, so you built this awesome home. You and your husband made some great decisions. Your family's next door. You found the antiques and you freaking got published. So
Yeah.
talk to everybody about how that is because you weren't working with a PR agency, right? You did this on
I,
your own.
I wasn't at the time, no. So prior to building my home, I had interviewed a Texas photographer. His name is Stephen Carlish, and I wanted him to shoot a project for me. And I quickly realized when I was calling about this project that I had not budgeted for that level of photography. So I went a different direction on that project, but I then knew the investment, so I started saving up for that for my own home. What I didn't know at the time and what I know now, it was such a blessing to have picked a photographer that was well versed in traditional interiors, because what I didn't know is how valuable their connections were at the time. I didn't know how willing, honestly, I knew that they had connections. I just didn't know whether they would be willing or not to pull those connections for you, kind of thing. And so I had picked him prematurely, and I was like, well, this is a goal I'm gonna set, and that's what I did. So I saved up for Steven and booked him for my home and booked a photo stylist for my home. And it was a really beautiful experience with him. I had actually met him about 6 months prior in Round Top. I ran into him and I was like, oh my gosh, we chatted on the phone about a year ago. And he was so kind and gracious to such a new designer that didn't have clout behind her. I thought that he had such humility and kindness and generous information to give. I was like, this is who I really want to work with. So that kind of sealed the deal with me saving up and spending it for him. And so little did I know, of course, his connections were what helped me land in Cottage Journal. His wife Kristen really helped me a lot, and that was just really kind of her, to put me in contact with them and get that taken care of. And so Cottage Journal picked it up, and that was really awesome because if anybody's familiar with a Cottage Journal, they do big features, big spreads on a home. You don't just see like a few images of a home in Cottage Journal. They feature a few homes per magazine, and they're all really different, but do lean traditional. And so it was like, I think 11 images total. So that was like, wow. So I could have, I had my eyes set on a few other magazines that I thought would be really incredible. But even if I would have gotten into that magazine, they would not have done a spread because that just isn't the nature of the magazine I was kind of originally thinking of. So that was such a blessing.
I mean, a good photographer, I wish I would have known what the investment was really worth in the beginning. I look back at some of my, early projects, and they were all good photographers, but they weren't interiors photographers. And there's still some projects I'm like, oh, I wish I had a really killer picture of that. But compared to my last few projects where I've been using the same photographer and videographer, there's no match. Like they are so much better because this is what they do every day and they do the high end. And like you said, they want their stuff published too. They want to
They
be
do.
able to tell clients that we were in Cottage Journal, we were in AD Mag, we were in Southern Living, because that gets them more jobs.
Yes,
So
it
for them
does.
to
Yeah.
work hard is a really big deal. I love that his wife helped you too.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a usual thing, but that was, yeah, really kind of his wife to pull her connections with Hoffman Media. So that was great. Yeah, that's my biggest, I would say, takeaway from photography, because obviously as a young designer you're like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money. Do I invest this kind of money? And there are a lot of other factors that go into weighing that decision, but I think the best thing is if that photographer has connections or you have seen his work published multiple times in traditional magazines, and the project you're going to have him hired for is traditional, that's really good. I think that the bigger issues kind of come in when you hire a photographer who's maybe typically shoots traditional and you have a more modern project, and it does really become a lot harder to place. So that's something I've had to learn on my own that has cost me a lot of money, because sometimes even the right photographs don't get you into a magazine. It really is the connection with the magazine. Or I mean, of course, you can hire a PR agent, but there's so much content out there these days that a lot of them will not guarantee that you're going to be in print, and you may only be in digital. And so, if you hire a PR agency, you're going to get published, but it just may not be where you thought you were going to land.
I agree with that. It is all relationships or it's timing. Like there's times where like, oh, that would have been good, 6 months ago, or there's so many logistics, PR agency or not, that between the investment of the photo shoot, which can be five figures, like if you really like break it down with hiring a stylist, hiring the photographers, the videographers, you not getting billable hours for days because you're setting up and you're doing what you're doing and all of that. I say like really the last part of a project, whether it's install days and all the hours leading up to it goes towards the photography. And that, I mean, it shows commitment. And some projects we don't get to photograph because the end result didn't quite get to meet the level of investment that's required.
For sure, for sure. And if you're able to keep somewhat of an inventory to pull to style on that shoot to try to get it there, that's been really pivotal for my business. and very profitable as far as like bringing in this layer. Well, a lot of times clients will see it and they're like, oh, well, I want to keep that. And I'm like, okay. I mean, everything's for sale, so sure. And so that's been awesome. But it's not that the project didn't need it. It was that a lot of clients just don't understand the amount of layers that really need to go in to be really finished, really magazine worthy, really is what that layer is.
And space is photographed differently than real life. Like, you can see something that in real life looks finished, looks great, functions well, but the camera, it falls flat. So you need that massive branch or you need that extra, pile of books or whatever it is. So good for you for recognizing early on you needed a stylist, but it sounds like you've kind of started a collection of your own styling items since then.
I have, and my stylist jokes that she doesn't really have to bring in much when she works with me, and that's so awesome because I will have everything like out in the garage organized on moving blankets and that she can just like pull from, and we do like briefings so she gets to see all that before she gets there to make sure that she has everything she needs. But yeah, we have a really good synergy where she trusts me with what I pull, she gives me some direction, and typically I have it in the inventory or I can easily find it with one of my local antique resources, and so that's been really good. But yeah, I would highly recommend that you pick a photographer that is used to shooting that aesthetic and getting that aesthetic published, so that because
Yeah, I
that
think that's
triggers
great.
that they have those connections.
I think it's great. I really, really think that knowing you need the right photographer, you need the right stylist, you need to get the right items like as the year goes on. So let's talk about how you source these items. And I mean, you're in Texas. Like, honestly, I cannot wait for the day that I roll up to Round
I
Top with a
know.
massive U-Haul and you give me the grand tour. So let's talk how you source your items.
Yeah, that would be so fun. Yeah, so I sourced, of course, in Round Top. That's a no brainer. I'm an hour away from Round Top. So I have been sourcing in Round Top for 10 years now. And so I've
Mhm.
built up relationships with vendors that I'm able to contact all year long. And some of them, are there. Some of them have storefronts that are open yearly. Some will do pop-ups. Some will store their things in Round Top, but they leave. So if I were to contact them, maybe they're like, yeah, I can facilitate that with one of my workers to get you that item. So there's a lot of different ways that happens, but having built those relationships over 10 years has been vital, to be able to get in, see product in times that it's not show times. My favorite times to go to Round Top are honestly before the show or after the show. Of course, I'm there like 5 times during the show, but I still prioritize going before and sometimes after if I wasn't successful in finding what I needed in my first go arounds. But of course, we have other places in Texas that are little hidden gems too. I mean, we've got Houston. There's a good amount of antiques in Houston. There are a lot of little towns that have things great for like small accessory sourcing, less on the furniture side, but the inventory we keep is smalls. So, or the collection of antiques per se that we keep are smalls, and so we'll source those all around Texas. We utilize auction houses and that are out of Texas, so that we're able to drive and go pick those up, and we're not having to do the extra expense of, you know, having those brought down from the Northeast.
No, and all that can be a little overwhelming with the logistics and hoping it arrives in one piece and hoping it looks as good as the pictures. Because I know I've ordered stuff and been like, oh, maybe I should have checked the size when I thought I was, getting something that was like a foot tall and it comes in and it's like 2 inches tall or whatever it is. I really think. But the relationships, I would love to share with everybody in the notes, kind of maybe some of your favorite round top vendors or favorite spots in Texas so they can follow them on Instagram. Because I know the
Yeah.
vendors love it and it's fun to find new people.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that that's kind of like everybody's favorite questions, and asking like, where do you shop in Round Top? And yes, and I'm happy to share a few of those. However, that's really that's not the winning key to being successful in Round Top.
Yeah.
The thing that sets the firm ahead in sourcing in Round Top, where we come home with loads and loads of things, is knowing where to go per the price point. Whenever you do come to Round Top, you will be like, wow, this is so much larger than what I ever could have thought it was. Miles and miles of antiques. And so, I mean, I might go there 5 days in a show and not cover all the ground. And so there's a lot to go through. So you need to know where and what style are at different places, but you also need to know their price points because you have a client budget. So if you're going to source somewhere where, yeah, they've got the product, but you went somewhere and spent your time somewhere where the client doesn't have the budget to spend, that eats up a lot of your time in Round Top, especially if you're not local and can't drive back the next day if you really needed to. Or if you don't have childcare the next day, like me, and I'm like pushing my child around Round Top, then that slows you down too.
I mean, of course, I joke, and my kids know that so many of our family vacations will get detoured because I'm like, we have to stop at whatever, kind of vintage mart or whatever store because the find is cool, the hunt is great, and it makes it your own. So
It does make it
that
your
is
own.
what a cool experience.
It sets your interiors apart when someone else can't source that item.
So, what are some of your favorite things that you're always looking to add to your collection?
Paintings. Like the one behind me, oil paintings. I love a good oil on canvas, old painting from the south of France. I think that they just add such richness to a space. They can decorate above a dresser without even adding books and accessories and lamps sometimes, so that you can go more minimal because the art just really speaks for itself. They sometimes you find a find that's a good price, and sometimes they're quite expensive, but the money goes a long way. Art increases in value. And then, of course, I feel the same way about antique rugs. I don't collect those as much because of that wild of an investment. I tend to really gravitate towards rugs that are, 5,000 up to 25,000. And so I'm not like just stashing those away yet. Hopefully one day, we all have goals that we can stash away some antiqueries. But paintings are, I think, the easiest thing to be like, okay, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna hunt for some good paintings today.
And for someone that might be flying to Round Top, a lot of them you can get, and they're much easier to transport home than a sofa or
Yes.
whatever it is. If you get them and they can be rolled, that's a great. I've carried tubes of art,
Mm-hmm.
as my carry on to airplanes. So I think collecting the art is a really great suggestion for a lot of people who are kind of trying to dip their toe into the world of
For
antiques.
sure, yeah. Run to the post office before you leave town and mail them back to yourself. That, and while that may be costly, it's a lot less costly than moving your furniture. So it's worth the investment to me.
I don't know why I haven't thought of just throwing it in the mail because a lot of airports have post offices in them.
Oh, I didn't even
Like
know
you
that.
literally can mail it that day. So that is what a great, great piece of advice. And I think for those of you who, didn't know what Round Top was prior to this conversation, it's literally like tens of miles of antique vendors, vintage enthusiasts that set up. Some are in permanent buildings, some are in tents, but designers and just people from across the country and world flock there. It's what, twice a year?
Well, twice a year big show is spring and
Yes.
fall. There's a small winter show that a select
Okay.
few are opened up for in January. But
Okay, that's
yes,
great to
I
know.
mean, every designer that you know of big time, like Amber Interiors, Shane McGee, Joanna Gaines, all of those people are sourcing in Round Top. for sure.
And I would say even like the furniture vendors and designers are going, finding the vintage items and then being inspired by them to create their own pieces.
Yes, a lot of actual big manufacturers come to Round Top to do that. Pottery Barn, Ralph Lauren,
Yeah.
like those teams come in to buy antiques to do that as well.
Okay, so one kind of last question that I love to ask everyone. If you could completely redesign a space, for me, I've been telling people it would be movie theaters. Like, I love the idea of going to a movie, but I've yet to go into a movie theater that actually like speaks to me of how I want to feel in the movies. So, what do you think your space would be that you could redo?
It would for sure be a restaurant because I love food. I love sharing meals with my friends and family. And if a restaurant doesn't have good interiors, it's just a really sad place to be, to share that time, right? You know, I feel like a lot of times we go to meals to either connect or be inspired or be filled up. And because we're so affected by our surroundings, why not make that the most it could be? I mean, I think sometimes the food could be a little subpar, but people enjoy the interior so much, they want to go and, you know, maybe just have a glass of drink or maybe have appetizers there or whatnot. I think the food does need to be good, but it's really a nice experience when both the food and the interiors are just really impeccable. I'm going to New York in December, and I always look forward to just being able to just go into restaurants where the interiors and the food are just really premium.
I agree. Has your firm had the opportunity to design a restaurant yet?
No, at the firm I was at prior, I assisted on a wine bar.
Okay.
That was one of my first projects out of the gate, actually, and that was very fun. I enjoyed that. I would have, you know, obviously you always would do something different looking back. I was very young in my design career, but it was so fun. But no,
Okay,
we've
well,
not
now it's
broken
out
into
in
a
the
restaurant.
universe.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you guys could do a really cool curated restaurant. So it's definitely out there. Someone's going to hear it and, ask y'all to do it.
Yeah, and if
But
you're
okay, so now,
Yeah, and if the interiors are inspired by the Bowery Hotel, then I'm definitely your girl. Like, that
yes,
is
that
my
would be,
dream to
oh,
be able to create like a vintage space like the restaurant at the Bowery called the Gemma, which is like my husband and I's favorite dining experience in New York. So, yeah, I'm your girl if you want that kind of interiors.
I love it. Okay, so now tell everyone where they can find you, anything exciting you have coming up, your socials, do it all.
Yeah, so I'm primarily just found on Instagram at Hailey Kolbe, and that's kind of where we live. Of course, you can find my website, just haileykolbe.com, and you can see our work there. But we just kind of exist in those two spaces. Definitely, you can DM us on Instagram, and we'd love to chat, especially if you're a designer and you want to connect. That's so fun. And then if you're a client, just interested in services, we have a project inquiry form that you can fill out on the website, and yeah, and we'll schedule a complimentary phone call with you after that. So that's how you would connect with us.
Awesome. Well, this was so great. It was so good to see your face if anybody is watching this on YouTube. But
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. You have worked so hard these past few years and it really shows. So, congratulations. And I wish you like all the best future success.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm just so honored to have been able to talk with you today. I'm so thankful for just having been able to connect at Luann Live, and what came of that relationship is just so sweet that we've been able to stay connected on Instagram and to have this conversation. I've said it to you prior, but I'll say it to you here on air. I'm so proud of you for just like diving into creating this podcast when you've got a lot going on between running your own design firm, doing the warehouse, and creating this podcast to create space for designers to chat about their hearts with design. I think it's just so sweet because we are truly affected by our surroundings. I mean, why else would we do this if we're designers? Of course we're affected. So to be able to talk about that is just really fun and sweet.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words. I can't wait to share this with everyone, but we hope you have a great day. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Highly Affected by Her Surroundings. I truly appreciate you taking the time to join us today. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the podcast. It helps others discover the show, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. For more behind-the-scenes content and design inspiration, follow us on social media. You can find me, Nicole, at Nixon Interiors, and the podcast at Highly Affected by Her Surrounding. We'll be sharing updates, sneak peeks, and exclusive offers you won't want to miss. Plus, if you want a recap or more details from today's episode, you can find the show notes at arnixoninteriors.com under the Highly Affected by Her Surroundings tab. Once again, thank you for your support, and I can't wait to connect with you on social. See you next time.